Hello everyone, and welcome back to the garage. Today we are going to start the restoration series on this 1978 Gottlieb Close Encounters of the Third Kind pinball machine. If you haven't seen my relatively recent video where I bought both this machine and a 1978 Williams Phoenix just off to the side here, I would recommend going ahead and watching that, as that kind of gives an overview of the condition and state of both of these machines. And I wasn't planning on starting the restoration series for this machine until after I finished the Phoenix, but I'm currently waiting on parts for the Phoenix to get some stuff working. So I figure we'll go ahead and start tackling this machine in the meantime. So in this video, we will start taking stuff apart and assessing the condition of everything, doing some cleanup. And after I clean up the playfield, clean up the inside of the back box, and just make sure everything looks good, we'll do some testing of the electrical components. I don't know if we'll get to it in this video, but after I do all my testing and making sure that everything checks out, we'll go ahead and plug this machine in and see if it still works after sitting for 40 years. So let's get started with the restoration series on this Gottlieb pinball machine. So this is the Gottlieb Close Encounters of the Third Kind pinball machine from 1978. So there's just a brief overview of how things look like right now. I have had this machine apart a couple times already just to take a look at stuff. And for sitting since the 80s, this machine is actually in pretty good condition. There's not very much wear on the playfield at all. And that's probably just because this machine hasn't seen a lot of play because it was retired back in the 80s and it hasn't been used since. So it's actually not in that bad a shape. It is very dirty though. You can see on the wood just how much residue there is, and I think that is mold. So before I do anything with this machine, any sort of testing at all, I need to clean up the playfield, I need to clean up the inside of the back box, and I need to clean up inside the game. So that is something that I'm going to start with first, because as you can see, the flippers here should be nice and white, just like this, so you can see how dirty they are. The plastics are also really dirty, and I'll get a better view of that once I get the glass off. The rubbers in this machine are very much in need of a replacement. As you can see how brown and dirty they are. There's some more rubbers on this side. When I had the machine open, the rubber around the right slingshot was completely broken, and it had hardened to a point where it cracked if you tried to bend it. So I already went ahead and removed that. As you can see, this plastic is broken because it's got some tape over the top of it. So obviously there's a break under that. These two plastics are broken as well, and they're not even screwed in all the way. This plastic is missing a nut on the top. And the reason why it is sticking out so much like that, I initially thought it was warped. It's just because there's a screw in there that's like half out of the thread. So it's pushing up against that plastic. So that can be fixed once I screw that back down. But besides everything being really dirty, this machine is in pretty good condition. And at this point, the second part of the Phoenix pinball machine restoration should be up pretty soon, and I got this machine to look very clean, like almost brand new looking. So I think that I can get this machine to look that way as well. So you can see the condition of the playfield. Not terrible, just dirty. Here's what the coin door looks like before I did any sort of cleaning to it. It's seen better days, but I think this is just dirt. I think I can get that off. I can get kind of this front area clean where the price signs are. If I go ahead and open it up, you can see it is quite dirty on the inside here, and I'll give you a better view of that once we get the machine opened up. It doesn't look like anything's missing, which is good. It's got all the components that it needs. Here's the inside of the coin door. As you can see, we might have a little bit of mold damage to this coin door. I mean, there's definitely mold inside the machine. You can smell it, but I think once I get my cleaning underway, we can get this machine to smell a lot better and get a lot of that mold out, because I did a lot of cleaning on the Williams Phoenix and all that mold smell's basically gone, and a lot of the mold was able to come just right off with a Clorox wipe. So I imagine this machine won't be too big of a deal to clean up and get looking nice. So let's go ahead and start taking this machine apart, and we'll get a better look at the internals. All right, I think we'll start in the back box of this machine because it is very easy to get into and service. And unlike on the Williams Phoenix, where you actually have to remove the back glass, Gottlieb did, in my opinion, a very amazing thing in the 1970s and early 80s, where to get behind here, all you have to do is unscrew this lock, which of course we had to drill out because we didn't have a key. You can just open this door, and there you go. You don't have to remove the back glass. It's just situated on this door. So it gives you very easy access to the back panel and the inside of the back box. So that is what this looks like before I did any sort of cleaning and service to it. As you can see, we have all of the displays. We have all of the bulbs. A lot of them have turned dark, so it's obvious that they've been in this machine for quite some time. But that's what that looks like. And if we go ahead and open this panel, that reveals the inside of the back box. And as you can see, back here we have metal shavings from where the lock got drilled out. And you can see all of the mold residue that's back here. Pretty nasty. But like I said, I think I can get a lot of that cleaned up with some Clorox wipes, so I'm not too concerned about that. Here's the backboard, and everything looks very nice on that. And then the inside of the back box, everything is here. There's not a ton going on back here, but these are the three major boards that control everything. This is the power supply, and before I put power into this thing, I am going to take it out of the machine and I'm going to test all of the electrolytic capacitors on it for proper capacitance, see if they're working, and I'm going to test them for leakage. Because if these capacitors are not working, then that could potentially mean disaster when I plug it in, and we could get voltages that are too high sent to different parts of the machine, which could end up destroying stuff. So I'm going to take all the precautions necessary before I apply power to this machine. This here is the driver board for the solenoids and the lamps. And if you watched my video on the Williams Phoenix, the driver board in this machine is much smaller. It's a lot simpler. But as you can see, we have all of the transistors necessary to drive the lamps and solenoids. So this board looks great, as well as the power supply board. I mean, I don't see any capacitor leakage on it, but that doesn't mean that the capacitors aren't electrically leaky. So I definitely want to test these out anyway. And then up here we have the main CPU board. And on these machines, instead of using 3 AA batteries to save high score and game settings information, they use these little GE Data Century type batteries. And I think that it might have leaked a little bit on this board. You can kind of see some of the traces around it look a little bit corroded, but it doesn't look too bad. So when I take this board out of the machine, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to see if I can wire this thing up to use AA's. Like, I'm not sure how much voltage that these things provide, but if it's 4.5 volts, then I could probably just tie in a battery holder, just like what you would do on a more modern pinball machine. Just take that and put it somewhere like up here and then tie it into the connections on this. I don't know if you can do that on these, and that is something that I'll find out. But other than that, this board looks to be in immaculate condition. So things look good back here, besides the little bit of battery leakage that I think is coming off of that little module there, but everything else looks pretty good. So the back box shows very promising results of working. Now let's go ahead and remove the glass, take a look at the playfield and the internals that are underneath that. So when removing the lockdown bar, one thing you'll notice right away is that the glass underneath is very dirty. So that is a telltale sign that this machine has been sitting for a very long time, not being used. And I'll warn you now, this glass, when it comes off, makes some terrible screeching noises, probably because of all the dirt that's in between the glass and the wood of the playfield. So I would recommend turning your volume down if you don't want to hear loud screeches. Jeez. This glass is like stuck, so it's definitely got a lot of dirt in it. There we go. If I kind of rock it like this, that's getting it off. Still doesn't really want to come out though. Okay, I got enough clearance on this now. Well, that's not as bad as it was the first time. If you saw my video where I went over both this machine and the Phoenix, it sounded a lot worse. You can kind of hear a little bit of that now. Yeah, that wasn't nearly as bad as the first time. So, I'm going to give you a good look at the state of the playfield as it is now. I have not done any cleaning of any kind to it other than vacuum up some cobwebs and a big spider that was behind the spinner. So, this is what the playfield looks like before I've done any work to it at all. You can see in the light there how much mold residue there is right there in the middle. I mean, all in all, it doesn't look too bad. It's just that things are really dirty and moldy. Like, for example, if I show you this plastic here and I get it in the light just right, see how much dirt buildup is on top of this? It's a lot easier to see in person than it is on camera, but that's kind of the level of dirt we're dealing with on everything. So, like even on this one, you can just see how much buildup there is on that one. And there was a similar amount of buildup on the Williams Phoenix machine, but I got it cleaned up to a point where it looked basically brand new, so I can probably get it to look just like that on this machine. And another thing that will also need cleaning is the little motor assembly that is right here. This will turn, as you can see, it turns freely. Actually, I've never turned that before. So that is also very dirty. You can see kind of the residue that's on top of the targets. So that will definitely have to get cleaned up. But yeah, this thing does turn nice and free. So that is good to see. Drop targets, they look pretty good. They don't look super worn. I'll have to engage the drop target reset so we can see the two black targets. But all in all, the machine is not in that bad of a condition. So let's take a look underneath the playfield and I'll show you what that looks like. So under the playfield is definitely quite dirty. So I'll have my work cut in for me in cleaning this up. But the underside of the playfield here looks to be very good. The only things that I noticed when I was in this machine for the first time is that this tilt switch is way out of adjustment. And this coil, this is one of the flipper coils, it needs grease because it doesn't want to come back all the way to there. So this one's fine, so that's what it's supposed to do. But this one, you can see it just needs some grease. So that'll be a simple fix. Everything else looks okay under here. Here are the components that are underneath the playfield, so there's not a ton going on down here. We have the main power transformer plus another little transformer. There's the fuse block. I did have to replace this fuse here. It's rated for a 1/4 amp, but I put a 1/2 amp in because I don't have a 1/4 amp, so I imagine that'll be fine. All the other fuses in this game were fine. And in terms of things that need to be tested down here, I do want to test the 2 bridge rectifiers that are right there, just to make sure those are working, because if they're not working, say if they're shorted and I go ahead and plug this machine in, those will basically explode. So I don't want to plug this machine in without checking those first. Right here, this little board right here is actually the sound board. So this little tiny board generates the sounds in this machine. So as you can see, there's not a lot going on. I imagine this little potentiometer is what adjusts the volume. I will definitely be testing these 3 capacitors that are on it to see if they're good. But I imagine this board will work just fine, just because there's not a lot on it that can go wrong. So I'm hopeful that the soundboard in this thing works. There's the speaker. It's a nice and big 8-ohm speaker. And other than that, there's not a ton going on down here that I saw that needed addressing, other than a wire for this coil. I believe this is the knocker coil, and it's been cut. So let me see if I can find the wire. Right here, this wire has been cut and it goes right there, you can tell. So I'll have to strip this back and resolder it on here. So someone either wanted to disable this coil or the coil was not working properly, because if you look at the paper surround on the coil, you can see it looks like this coil may have been burning. So I don't know if this coil is stuck on, like when it was last used, if it was just stuck on. But we'll figure that out once we get this machine powered on. But other than that, I didn't see any other problems in this machine. But the fact that we did have a blown fuse might indicate that there is something wrong. But I won't be able to figure that out until we power the machine up. So now that we've kind of seen the inside of the playfield and the rest of the game, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning this thing up, making it look better, and we'll see how it looks after I'm done doing that. So, like I said, I am going to be cleaning up this machine first before I do any sort of electrical testing, and that is just because of the amount of dirt and mold in this machine. It just has to come out before I do anything else. So, the first thing that I'm going to do is take off all of the plastics on this machine. I'm going to clean each one of them up, and that will allow me to get all of the old rubbers out and replace them with new ones, as well as take all of the old lights out and replace them with LEDs, because a lot of the lights that are in this machine right now have turned dark and they probably don't work. So I am going to be doing the upper playfield lighting when I do the rubber replacement. So when we first turn this machine on, it's actually going to look pretty good if the general illumination is working. So I'm going to go ahead and start taking some stuff apart, and we'll get to cleaning. Well, before I get to cleaning, I just noticed something about the playfield. This post is missing, and this post is missing. But this post isn't actually missing. This piece was kind of just pushed way back in here like this. And if I pull it out, you can see there's the post right there. So that should be screwed in right there. So I don't know why that was like that. And here's another really bad rubber. As you can see, this is like hard as a rock. So once I get all the rubbers replaced, that will look much better. But we are gonna have to live without this post for now, because I don't think I have another pinball post. It should look just like this one here with a little rubber on it. So in the future, I imagine I'll get another one of those posts to put in, but we're just gonna have to live without that for right now. So let's get started with the cleaning process. Well, I've got all the plastics off, and you can kind of see how everything is extremely dirty and needing to be cleaned. I took some of the posts off. I still have to take some of these little plastic pieces off, but that's no big deal. You can see how dirty and really bad the rubbers look in this game. I even saw some missing lights up here, so that's always a good sign. There's another missing light there. Obviously, this game was somebody's project at one point, because when I was unscrewing the nuts that were on top of the plastics, 90% of them just came off with a tiny little turn, so they weren't even on tight. And you can see this screw was just like this. I didn't loosen it, so that is exactly how those screws were. A lot of them were loose already. I still have to take some of these other posts off that are held in by these little nut style screws that the actual nuts, these things, screw on top of. I got all of these plastics off, so now those are ready to be cleaned up. But yeah, this game is actually worse than the Phoenix in terms of how dirty it is and how much work the playfield needs. I mean, it's not too much worse, but I will have to do a little more to it than what I did on the Phoenix. So I'm going to go ahead and get some more of these plastics and posts off, and then we'll take a look at the condition of the playfield when I'm done doing that. Well, I've taken most of the stuff off the playfield, as you can see, and I can honestly say that this is the dirtiest playfield that I have ever had to deal with. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot worse playfields out there, but this one was something else. You can see how it's supposed to look, and you can see how the dirt and mold has made the color change quite dramatically. So I imagine that by the time I start cleaning this machine up, it's going to look so much different. I mean, I had so much dirt on my hands when I was doing this. I should have been wearing gloves, but I wasn't. But yeah, this whole thing is just a mess. You can see how dirty it is back there. I took the plastics off. I have them sitting over here, so you can see the level of dirt on those still. I still have to get those cleaned up. I did go ahead and take the tape off of the right slingshot plastic, and as you can see, it's broken right through. So I'm either going to have to glue this plastic back together or try to find a new one. So the next thing I'm going to do in this playfield is take out the rest of the pieces, take out this, take out the two metal pieces here, take out this piece, take out the little section that the glass slides into so I can get underneath there and clean out all the dirt and mold. So that is next on the to-do list, and after I do that, that is essentially how far I'm going to strip down the playfield. I'm not going to go any more than this. It's already basically stripped down. The bumpers I'm going to leave in because I can clean underneath them and around them just fine. So those are going to stay in. All the targets and upper playfield switches are going to stay in, and the motor assembly is going to stay in. So that's what it looks like with all of the plastics and posts and screws removed. So I'm going to remove the stuff up here, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, I went ahead and removed the big metal piece here that the glass slides into, and you can see how dirty it is back there. And to make that easier to remove, if you have to remove that piece on one of these Gottlieb machines, open the back glass door. It makes it so much easier. I also went ahead and removed all the screws from this white metal piece, and these two metal doors have nuts on the other side of the screws, and those nuts are attached directly to this white piece, so those will have to come out after this gets removed. So let's remove it and see what it looks like underneath. And we have another metal piece that will also need to be removed. As you can see, there's not much dirt under here because this is all covered, so you can see the difference between the covered and uncovered wood. The underside of this actually looks pretty good. I'll still clean it, but it's not that bad. So I imagine that since all those screws have been removed, I can just remove this. Yeah, like this metal piece comes out, And I imagine, oh, this slides. Okay, so how's that gonna work? I might have to pull the playfield out a little bit to get this off because it slides that way. Oh, perfect. Okay, I can just pull the playfield. Let's see, how far can I pull it? Not that much farther. Let's pull it just a little bit more. So that will come out. Oh, look at all the dirt under there. Yeah. Good thing I am pulling this out, but I am going to have to open the playfield fully to get that out. And I just noticed something about the playfield. The tracks that it rides on when it's open like this, it actually allows you to pull the playfield out pretty far. So I am going to go ahead and do that. Yeah, it allows you to pull it out that far. There we go. Just wanted to get that off and then this off as well. Oh, now I understand. The reason why you can pull it out like that is so you can lean it back. So hang on a second. So you can pull it to there, and that is so you can do this. There. That's what you can do with it. Okay, cool. So Gottlieb gives you the ability to put the playfield all the way back against the back box like that in case you really need to get under here and service stuff. So that's almost like a bingo machine. And you cannot do that on the Williams Phoenix. So Gottlieb has the one up here over Williams in that regard. So that is what it looks like with that metal piece disassembled. And this is officially the extent I'm going to go with stripping the playfield, except for removing the flippers to clean them. And also the apron, I have to remove this too. But that's the entire playfield portion. And if you notice up here on the left, this is completely covered and no one sees this when they're playing. It says Close Encounters 424. I imagine that is the model number for this game. So interesting to see that little Easter egg up there in the corner. So how I'm going to tackle this is first I'm going to clean up the playfield, get all the dirt and mold off. Then I will remove the apron and the flippers and get those cleaned up, clean all the dirt and mold that's probably under this thing. And that includes removing the little metal piece for the plunger there as well. Then I will start putting everything back together, put LED lighting in this thing, put all new rubbers in, clean up the plastics and put them back on, and then this playfield will look a million times better. So let's get started. All right, so here's where we're at with the playfield cleaning process so far. Everything underneath the apron has been cleaned. I cleaned off the apron, and I think it looks a lot better than how it looked when I first got the machine. I put the top metal assemblies back on the playfield, and that looks much better. I also went ahead and gave the playfield a couple coats of wax, so now it is shinier than it's been before, and so that is how it looks right now. The only other things I have left to do before I can start putting the playfield back together is I have to clean up the targets on this motor. Now I did wipe down a couple of them already, so you can kind of see how they're gonna look. You can compare that to the star target right there. You see how dirty the targets after the star are, and that's how they look after I clean them. And I just gave those a once over lightly, so they're gonna look even better than how they're gonna look now. And then I have to put the LEDs in the upper playfield sockets, which at this point I'm ready to do. But as you can see on this game, the sockets for the LEDs are countersunk. They're not flush with the actual wood. So what I had to end up doing is, instead of using a regular pinball LED like this, I had to buy these retro style LEDs. Now they're exactly the same as these. They just have a slightly taller footprint resembling an incandescent bulb, and I'll compare that. Here's a bulb, and you can see the footprint of the LED and the bulb are exactly the same. So what these LEDs do is they allow you to actually stick the LED into a countersunk socket and have it stick up far enough to light up the plastic and the surrounding playfield. So as you can see, the LED sticks up a normal amount. And if you try to put a regular LED in one of these countersunk sockets, it will physically not fit. So that's why I had to get this style of LEDs for this game. They are warm white, so they should look exactly the same as a traditional warm white LED, but most of the sockets in this playfield are going to require those LEDs, because you can see a large majority of them are countersunk. This one I could put a regular LED into, but I might as well go ahead and just put a retro style LED in there so it looks the same as the rest of them. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that done. Another thing I need to do is I have the parts kind of disassembled and set up over here. I've cleaned up plastics and these pieces, as you've already seen, but I still have to clean up all these plastic posts, and I have to wire brush all of these nut screws because the amount of oxidation on these is something else. And I don't want the machine having screws in it that look like that, because you can see these when they're installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then after I clean all this stuff up, I should be ready to start reinstalling all the plastics and put on the new rubber kit that I have for this machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all that started. All right, I've cleaned up all the motor targets, and you can see they look so much better. No more of that filthy dirt residue on the fronts of them. So as far as things underneath the playfield are concerned, I still have to replace all of the bulbs under here. And these bulbs actually look quite good. Like these, I don't think are dark. I think these are just dirty. So the bulbs under here actually look like they would still work. But as you can see, all the dirt inside the light lenses, that's all gonna have to get cleaned out. There's a lot more of it in these, you can see. And when I was doing the lights underneath the Phoenix playfield, it was exactly the same thing. All of the lenses had a bunch of dirt under them. So this one's no different. So I'm gonna have to take out all of the bulbs and clean out each individual lens so that the dirt doesn't show when the light is actually on. And one thing I did see is there are also 2 light bulbs here that are designed to light up the motor on the upper side of the playfield. So those will need to be swapped out as well. So I still have to do all the lighting underneath the playfield. Then got to clean up the mess underneath the playfield, because at this point I haven't done any more to the playfield than what I've already done in the first video where I went over these two machines. So this still has to get done. I did go ahead and grease this coil, this flipper coil, so now it actually bounds back. But I think I might have to do the same thing with the slingshot coil, because as you can see, it doesn't want to come all the way back. It gets pretty close, but it does get kind of stuck. So I'll have to grease that one up too. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, get all the bulbs pulled out of here, clean up the lenses, and replace them all with warm white LEDs. But before we focus on underneath the playfield, let's finish the upper playfield first. So I've already gone ahead and kind of started cleaning everything. I've got all of those white posts cleaned. I still have to do the screws, but I can start putting some stuff back in so that I have less parts just floating around the garage here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started putting some parts back in. So after using the wire brush on all of those screws, that is what they look like now. They look much better. No more of that crazy oxidation that was on them before. So that was the last thing I needed to do before I started putting the playfield back together. So let's get started putting the playfield back together. And one other little thing before reassembling the playfield. This is exactly why you need to replace your plunger rubber, because as you can see, the front of it has totally broken off. So the metal part of the plunger would hit right against the ball, and that is not good for the ball or the playfield. And this rubber is basically as hard as a rock. I can move it a little bit, but I can't slide it off the plunger. So I'm gonna have to cut that rubber off so that I can install a new one. So that will be done when I reassemble the playfield on this thing. And here is the new rubber kit I'm going to install on this machine. As you can see, we have a new plunger rubber in there, so that will replace the old decrepit one. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting the playfield back together, putting all the rubbers in, and then we'll see how it looks after I'm done. So now let's go ahead and start vacuuming up all the filth in the back box. So you can see we got quite a bit of dirt down on the inside of the door. And this back glass is actually removable. You just have to remove all these little plastic pieces that surround the back glass and keep it in. And then the back glass will come out, but I'm not gonna do that right this second. I just wanna clean all the dirt out of the door I want to clean the front side of the backboard. You can see that there's mold around the little circular light tunnels there, so I'll have to clean that out. And I'm also going to get all of the mold and dirt and everything out of the inside of the back box as well. Give everything a nice vacuuming and wiping and just make it look a ton better back here. So let's get started with the back box. All right, so I'm just starting to do some work under the playfield, and I found my first problem with this game, and it doesn't surprise me that this was a problem. The knocker coil was mounted right here for the credits, and originally it had one of its wires cut from it. So at first I thought that the previous owner just wanted to disable the coil, like maybe they thought it was obnoxious or something. But I took a closer look at the coil. I went ahead and desoldered it from the system, so it's right here. You see how the paper around the coil has gotten dark? Well, that means that the coil has gotten very hot internally. And so that made me think they probably cut the wire off this coil because it had a problem. So I went ahead and I took out the coil. I desoldered the two wires and I desoldered this little diode that went across the two wires. I checked the diode and it's good, but I checked the resistance of this coil here, dead short, 0 ohms. So this coil, obviously the enamel coating on the wires inside the coil has started to decay, and so the coil is now internally shorted, and that is why it got hot, and that's why the paper's dark. And that also could explain why this fuse in the game here was blown. I don't know if this is part of the coils, the solenoids. I don't know if that's the fuse for that, but that fuse was blown and I replaced it. So it is a good thing that I removed the coil and checked it before I powered the machine on, because that absolutely would have caused problems. So this coil's dead, but I went ahead and looked through my spare parts and I have a brand new coil right here. And it looks like it's the same footprint as the Gottlieb coil. It might be a tiny bit smaller. I'll have to see if this one will work. But it's got 2 points, just like the Gottlieb coil. And I checked the resistance of it, and it's got 9 ohms, and that is the exact resistance you want for one of these coils. So I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew the metal brackets that support this coil. I'm gonna remove it, and I'm gonna replace it with this one, because you can see the problem with it being stuck too. The little metal piece that's in there should be able to slide freely through the coil when I do this to it, and it should be very smooth, and it's just stuck. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of take apart this coil a little bit, get the little metal rod out of there, and see if I can transplant it into this new coil. Well, I got the coil out, but I think that coil has gotten way hotter than I initially expected, because with these coil mounts, there's 4 screws holding them on. Only one screw out of the 4 was good. All the rest are stripped. The threads inside these things are destroyed, and the threads on the screws themselves are destroyed. This is the good one, as you can see. But if I take the other 2 screws that I pulled out, see if I can get it to focus on that. The threads on those are destroyed. So both the screws and the mounts are bad. So I will need to replace both of these, and I'll have to find some new screws that will fit in there. The screws shouldn't be a problem, but I'll have to go onto a specific Gottlieb parts website to order 2 of these because those are both bad. And if you look at the inside of the coil sleeve, I don't know how it's gonna focus in on that, but I'll see if I can. You see that? It is black in there. So that coil has gotten extremely hot. So I'm gonna see if I can put the new coil on. All right, I got the new coil in there and it is a perfect fit. And now if I turn this, see how the knocker goes nice and free through the coil? That's how it should be. Smooth as butter. So that fits perfectly. And you might be wondering, how did I get this back in if 3 of the 4 screws were stripped? Well, the way I got them out is I used a nail set and just hammered them out. So I was able to get them out that way. I just hammered them back in because I figured, you know what? I'm probably never gonna have to take this coil out again. I'll just hammer them back in, and that worked just fine. So now it's nice and secure in there. And I went ahead and took the paper off the old coil. Now, some of these coils did have black wiring on the inside, but if you look around the edge of the coil, you can see the wiring was actually red, so the coil wiring has turned black. It's gotten that hot. I'm surprised this thing didn't start a fire inside the machine, because if the wires have gotten that far black, that thing got red hot. And if you look at the inside of the paper, completely black. So this thing is definitely a fire hazard. So I'm glad I got that out of the machine and replaced it with a nice good one. And you can kind of see through the paper seal on this one, the wires on that one are nice and red. That's how it should look. So we got that coil replaced and we avoided potentially a massive problem that we would have encountered when we turned on the machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue working on the underside of the playfield. And so that's gonna be it for part 1. In part 2, we will finish doing the cleanup on this machine. All we have to do now is just the underside of the cabinet and inside the coin door, and then all the cleanup will be done. Then we will start doing some testing. We'll test some stuff inside the playfield. We'll test the boards inside the backbox, and we'll see if things work. And if everything looks good, then we can go ahead and plug this machine in and power it up for the first time in 40 years. So look forward to that in part 2, and I will see you in my next video.